The pneumatic hiss of the secure briefing room door was the only sound as she was escorted out. A cleaning woman, dismissed from a classified briefing on the national security crisis in Kabul. Every four-star officer and cabinet official watched her go, but as she passed the Secretary of Defense, he froze. His coffee cup shattered on the polished floor. He just recognized the unassuming janitor. She was the ghost operator who pulled him from the collapsing embassy. Her name was Maya. Officially, she was a GS-5 facilities cleaner, but in the classified registry she was Whisper, a Tier 1 extraction specialist from a unit so covert it doesn't have a public name. For 18 months, she had been invisible, working nights in the Pentagon's most secure wings. Now, with a single glance, her cover was incinerated in the room where America's wars are planned. So how does a ghost from the Kabul evacuation end up pushing a mop? And what happens when the most dangerous secret in the building is suddenly, catastrophically exposed? In that frozen second, Secretary of Defense Robert Vance saw not a cleaner, but the woman from the rooftop in Kabul. August 15, 2021. The embassy compound was collapsing under a hail of small arms fire. His security detail was gone. Then, a figure in nondescript civilian clothes emerged from the smoke, moved with terrifying efficiency, and shoved him into a waiting armored Suburban. She spoke only 2 words, head down. He never saw her face clearly until this moment, in the Pentagon's inner sanctum. Her cover was a masterpiece of bureaucratic camouflage. Maya's personnel file showed a routine transfer from a base facilities contract, her background check clean but shallow. She worked the midnight shift, cleaning the earring's most sensitive spaces after the senior staff departed. For 18 months, she emptied trash cans outside the door of the Secretary of Defense, buffed floors in the Joint Chiefs briefing room, and heard fragmented conversations about global deployments. She was a ghost, and that was the entire point. The unit she came from doesn't appear in any public budget. Referred to in classified annexes only as the Grey Cell, it was formed in the early 2000s. Its mandate, deploy operators who could move through denuded areas without any traceable military signature. They weren't spies, but soldiers designed to be forgotten. Recruitment focused on individuals with rare linguistic skills, ambiguous ethnic features, and most critically, the psychological profile to endure profound isolation. Maya, a former army sergeant who'd tested off the charts in spatial reasoning and stress inoculation, was a perfect candidate. But the Kabul extraction was her last mission. The Grey Cell's operational doctrine is brutal. Once an operator's face becomes potentially known to hostile forces, they are cycled out. Maya's image was captured on a dozen Taliban-linked cell phones during the embassy dash. She was burned. Standard protocol called for a new identity and a quiet relocation. Maya requested a different exit. She asked to stay close to the only world she knew. So a deep cover support role was created, burying her in the Pentagon's vast logistical machinery. It was meant to be a soft landing, a way to watch over community she'd bled for from the shadows. The man now turning a furious shade of crimson across the briefing table was General Thomas Tag Carson, 4 stars, Air Force, and the senior military advisor for the briefing. He hadn't been in Kabul. He saw only a breach of protocol so severe it threatened the integrity of a top-secret special compartmented information discussion. His voice cut through the stunned silence. "Mr. Secretary, what is the meaning of this? Who is this person?" Vance was still staring, the memory of gunfire and diesel smoke overlaying the sterile present. He ignored Carson and took a step toward Maya. Whisper, the code name, spoken aloud in that room, had the effect of a detonation. Every cell in Maya's body screamed to execute her evasion drill. Instead, she gave the slightest nod, her eyes darting to the security officer whose hand was now on his sidearm. The spell broke. Vance turned to the room, his authority slamming back into place. "Everyone out, now, except you, General." The aides, the intelligence briefer, the junior officers fled. The massive door sealed shut, leaving the 3 of them in a room humming with suppressed panic. "Not talking," Carson demanded, though the order was aimed at Vance. The secretary kept his eyes on Maya. "You saved my life. Then you vanished from the debrief. They said you were handled." Maya's voice, when she finally used it, was low and steady, devoid of the submissive tone expected of her cover. "I was, sir. This was the handling." She gestured slightly to her maintenance uniform. Carson's mind was connecting jagged pieces. A covert operator working as a janitor inside the Pentagon. This is a catastrophic security failure. Who authorized this? Vance finally looked at him. I did, tag, off the books. After Kabul, I wanted her where I could keep an eye. It was a lie, but a necessary one to shield the Grey Cell's actual command structure. But the damage was irreversible. The core principle of Maya's presence, anonymity, was now ash. Carson's tactical mind was already assessing the fallout. She's been inside this room how many times? She's had unfettered physical access to terminals, discarded draft documents, secure waste. For 18 months, Vance countered, with a TS-SCI clearance higher than yours, General, vetted by protocols you don't have read on for. The two men were locked in a power struggle, with Maya as the contested, dangerous asset. And here's the first critical mistake. In his fury, General Carson made a fatal assumption. He believed the threat was espionage, that Maya was a sleeper, a mole. He didn't consider that her placement was an act of profound, if desperate, care for a soldier the system had used up. He snapped a command to the security detail outside. Take her to holding room Bravo, full isolation. No one speaks to her until the counterintelligence field activity team arrives. Vance began to protest, but Carson overrode him. With respect, Mr. Secretary, this is now a counterintelligence matter under my purview. You are compromised by personal involvement. As two stern-faced agents guided Maya from the room, she caught Vance's eye. There was no fear in her look, only a grim resignation. The clock was now ticking on a different kind of mission, containment. Back in his office, General Carson initiated a flurry of actions. He ordered a total lockdown of Maya's digital footprint. He demanded the original, unaltered version of her personnel file from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. And he placed a call to the Pentagon's Force Protection Detachment, requesting an armed guard detail on the holding room. He was building a box around a mystery he didn't understand. What he didn't know was that Maya's file was a Russian nesting doll of redactions. The surface layer was the janitor. Beneath that, a flag for special activities. Beneath that, a cryptographic lock that could only be opened by two people in the entire national security apparatus. And Carson had just invited a CIFA team whose standard investigative playbook would involve trying to crack that lock from the outside. It was the equivalent of poking a sleeping bear with a full audit. Meanwhile, in the sterile white of holding room Bravo, Maya sat perfectly still. She was calculating. Her cover was gone, but her training was not. The room had two cameras, one in the corner, one behind the mirror. The door was reinforced with a magnetic lock. Standard protocol would give her 4 hours before the first serious interrogation. She closed her eyes and began regulating her breathing, conserving energy. The real battle wasn't about her past. It was about what happened next. Because General Carson, in his zeal to plug a security hole, was about to trigger a protocol that would send silent alarms through the very darkest corridors of American special operations. And when those alarms sounded, they wouldn't send lawyers. They would send a different kind of problem solver. The first thing to break wasn't the lock, but the story. Carson's aide, a sharp lieutenant colonel, rushed into his office 90 minutes later, her face pale. "Sir, the file, it's rejecting all pull requests. The system is returning a Gamma-level oversight required error. I've never seen that flag before." Gamma. That was a code word Carson had heard only in whispers, referring to oversight that bypassed the Joint Chiefs entirely. His phone rang. It was the head of the Pentagon Police. "General, we have a situation. A civilian gentleman is at the river entrance. No appointment. He's demanding to see you. He says to tell you it's about the asset in Bravo. And sir, he won't show ID, but his vehicle plates are diplomatic." The man at the river entrance wore a suit that cost more than Carson's monthly salary, and he carried no identification because he didn't need to. His name, for the purposes of the logbook, was Mr. Aldrich. He was shown directly to the general's office, bypassing 6 layers of security without a single challenge. When he entered, he didn't salute. He simply took a seat and said, "You've activated a silent protocol, General. Now you have 2 choices. You can stand down, or you can start a war you cannot win inside your own building." Carson, a man used to command, found himself on the back foot. "Who are you to make threats in the Pentagon?" Aldrich smiled thinly. "I'm not making a threat. I'm explaining gravity. The individual in holding room Bravo is a Gamma-level asset. Your investigation is a violation of a security covenant that predates your commission. You will dismiss the CIFA team. You will release the asset to me. and you will consider this conversation never to have happened." Carson's face hardened. "An unidentified civilian does not walk in here and dictate terms on a potential espionage case." Aldrich leaned forward. "This isn't espionage, this is housekeeping, and you are tracking mud across a clean floor." Meanwhile, Secretary Vance had retreated to his private office. He was not a man prone to panic, but the gears of a massive, hidden machine were beginning to turn because of his moment of recognition. He placed a secure call to a number that rang only twice before being answered. He spoke a single code phrase, "Whisper is compromised." The line went dead. That was the entirety of the protocol. Help would not be coming. The message was simply, "Prepare for consequences." Back in the holding room, Maya remained still, but her senses were parsing new data. The rhythm of the guard shifts outside her door changed. The usual pair was replaced by a single, older sergeant whose posture she recognized, not just military police, but close protection. Someone had upgraded her security, and not out of concern for her well-being. They were containing a valuable specimen. The door opened. It was General Carson, alone. His earlier fury cooled into a sharp, analytical focus. He pulled a chair opposite her. "No lawyer, no recording, just talk. Who are you really working for?" Maya met his gaze. "The United States of America, General. Spare me the patriotism," he snapped. "Your file is a ghost. Your presence here is an abomination of protocol. Vance claims he authorized it, but he doesn't have the authority to create a false identity that deep." "So who does?" Maya said nothing. She was weighing him. Was he an adversary or just a bureaucrat who'd stumbled into a dark room? Carson tried a different tack. "The Kabul evacuation, you were there. You extracted the secretary, then you disappeared from all debriefs." "Why, I was debriefed," Maya said quietly, "just not by anyone in your chain of command." That stopped him. The gray cell didn't report to the Pentagon. It reported to a committee that answered directly to the National Security Council, a committee Carson had only heard rumors about. The pieces were aligning into a terrifying picture, a covert military unit operating with complete autonomy inside the United States, placing sleeper operatives within the Defense Department's own headquarters. His counterintelligence mind saw a nightmare, but he was missing the human truth. Aldrich, having been stonewalled by Carson, didn't leave the building. He went to the office of the Pentagon's Director of Administration, a civilian who managed the building's vast support contracts. Without raising his voice, Aldrich produced a single sheet of paper bearing a seal that made the director blanch. 10 minutes later, a digital kill order was executed. Every record of Maya's employment, her contract, her payroll, her badge access logs, began to self-delete from the primary servers. It was a controlled burn, an attempt to erase the paper trail before Carson's investigators could capture it. But Carson was ahead of them. His aide had the foresight to make local, offline copies of everything pulled before the gamma lock descended. They now had a forensic snapshot, timestamps, keycard swipes, even the cleaning schedules for the earring. They began to map her movements, and a pattern emerged that sent a chill down Carson's spine. Maya hadn't just cleaned random offices. Her access showed a precise, repeating loop. The secretary's suite, the Joint Chiefs briefing room, and the secure communications vault on the third sublevel. It was a collection pattern. Confronted with this map, Carson stormed back to Vance's office. "She wasn't here for a soft landing, Bob. She was here to listen. She's been mapping your routines, your secure discussions for a year and a half. You didn't protect a hero, you harbored a spy." Vance, exhausted and guilty, shot back. "You think I don't know what the data looks like? I reviewed her pathing a month after she arrived. It's called Tradecraft Tag." She was maintaining her skills. Scanning for physical vulnerabilities, practicing ingress and egress routes. It's what she's trained to do. It doesn't make her a hostile. But Carson was no longer listening. He had a narrative now, one that justified his actions. He ordered his security detail to move Maya from holding room Bravo to a more secure facility off-site, a classified location used for high-value detainee interviews. This was the mistake Aldrich had warned him against. Moving her off the Pentagon grounds would trigger a different set of protocols, not administrative, but operational. As two guards entered to cuff her, Maya cooperated. But as they moved into the corridor, she executed a subtle, graceful maneuver. As the lead guard turned left, she deliberately stutter-stepped, causing the trailing guard to bump into her. In that split second of confusion, her hands, still cuffed in front, dipped into the lead guard's open jacket, and palmed his secondary weapon, a compact pistol in a shoulder holster. She didn't draw it. She simply concealed it against her abdomen, hidden by the folds of her maintenance uniform. The guards noticed nothing. She now had an option. It was two black SUVs. Maya was placed in the second vehicle, sandwiched between two guards. As they pulled out of the Pentagon's underground tunnel, she began to speak, her voice calm. The driver, Specialist Griggs, right? Wife's name is Elena, new baby boy. The guard to her left stiffened. How do you know that? Maya continued, looking at the guard on her right. You're Sergeant Miller. You're $36,000 in debt from your divorce. You gamble online on your duty phone. Both men were now staring at her, hands moving toward their weapons. I know, she said, because for 18 months, I've been the person who empties the trash cans in your ready room. I've read the discarded personal letters, the torn-up payday loan notices. I'm not your enemy, but the man who ordered this move, General Carson, is about to get you all killed. Before they could process the threat, the lead SUV suddenly swerved. A massive, unmarked delivery truck had pulled sideways, completely blocking the exit ramp from the tunnel. The convoy slammed to a halt. From the truck's cab, three figures emerged, dressed in generic utility worker gear, but they moved with a synchronized, predatory grace. They were not here to talk. This was the Gray Cell's response. Aldrich's request for a stand-down had been denied. The retrieval team was now active. Their orders were simple: recover the asset by any means necessary and leave no witnesses who could compromise unit integrity. The lead guard in Maya's SUV radioed for backup, but the signal was dead, jammed. The utility workers approached, their hands empty but their intent clear. They had come for Maya, and they were prepared to go through her guards to get her. Maya made her choice. In one fluid motion, she raised her cuffed hands, the concealed pistol now in her grip. But she didn't aim at the approaching team. Instead, she pointed it at the vehicle's window and fired twice, shattering the glass. Get out now, go left, toward the metro entrance, she yelled at the stunned guards. She was creating chaos, breaking the script. The retrieval team paused, their plan disrupted. Maya met the eyes of the team leader through the broken window. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of recognition. She had just initiated her own extraction. She spilled out of the SUV onto the concrete, the pistol now discarded. The two guards, following their training, scrambled for cover. The retrieval team advanced not on the guards but directly on Maya. But in that moment of redirected focus, a new vehicle screeched into the fray. It was a Pentagon police cruiser. General Carson, monitoring the move, had ordered a tail. The scene exploded into confusion. Shouts, drawn weapons, overlapping commands. Maya saw her opening. While the retrieval team and the police were in a tense standoff, she simply stood up, walked calmly past the delivery truck, and vanished into the early evening foot traffic of Alexandria. The most dangerous woman in the building had just gone to ground, and she was now in the wind, pursued by both her own government and her own shadowy unit. The fallout was instantaneous and severe. In Carson's office, the reports were chaotic. An operator had escaped. A covert team had engaged Pentagon personnel on American soil. The Secretary of Defense was demanding answers from a locked bunker, and Mr. Aldrich was back on the phone, his voice chillingly calm. General, you were warned. You now have an activated, trained Gray Cell operator loose in the National Capital Region. She has no support, no exfiltration plan, and nothing left to lose. She is the ultimate deniable asset, and you have just given her a reason to deny us all. But here, what Carson still didn't understand: Maya wasn't running to betray secrets. She was running to protect one. During her months of silent observation, she hadn't just been practicing tradecraft. She had discovered something. A subtle, consistent anomaly in the secure waste from a specific office in the E-ring. Fragmented printouts, chemical traces on shredded documents that didn't belong. She had pieced together a suspicion so sensitive she dared not report it through any channel, not even her own. Her cover wasn't just a hiding place. It had become her observation post for a different kind of threat. And now, with both her own keepers and the Pentagon hunting her, she had to decide: disappear forever or risk everything to expose what she'd found. For the first 12 hours, Maya didn't run. She inverted. She moved deeper into the heart of the surveillance state, to a budget hotel 2 blocks from the Pentagon City Mall, paying cash from the emergency fund she kept sewn into her maintenance uniform. Her training screamed that it was a trap to stay so close, but her objective wasn't escape. It was verification. The anomaly she'd found wasn't digital, it was physical. In the secure shredding bags from Office 3 Echo, the Deputy Undersecretary for Intelligence Integration, she had found consistent chemical traces of ammonium nitrate and powdered aluminum, unburned residues from a specific type of homemade explosive. This wasn't about leaked documents. This was about materials. Someone inside that office was either building bombs or, more likely, running a test program for detection evasion. The shredded pages were likely packaging. For 18 months, she'd collected samples in tiny, self-sealing bags she hid in a hollowed-out section of her cleaning cart. It was a hobby, a puzzle to keep her mind sharp. Now, it was the only leverage she had left in the world. Across the river, the crisis was metastasizing. General Carson faced a three-front war. The Secretary of Defense had officially relieved him of command over the investigation, citing conflict of interest. The Grey Cell, through Aldrich, had delivered an ultimatum: stand aside for a 48-hour window to allow a quiet retrieval, or face the exposure of half a dozen black operations that would collapse alliances and end careers. And the Pentagon's own security apparatus was in revolt, furious that an operator had escaped custody and that a hostile team had operated with impunity on their doorstep. Carson, isolated and desperate, made a final, brilliant play. He went to the one person he knew Maya might still trust, Sergeant Marcus Thorne, the close protection officer who'd been posted outside her holding room. Thorne was a 20-year veteran, a former ranger with a reputation for integrity. Carson didn't order him, he appealed to him. "She's out there, Sergeant, and the people looking for her aren't planning to bring her in for a talk. They're going to vanish her. You saw her." "Is she a traitor?" Thorne's answer was careful. "No, sir." She was calm, prepared, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Find her," Carson said. "Before they do, tell her I'll listen, no tricks." It was a gamble laced with hypocrisy, but it was the only thread left. Thorne, operating off the books, used his network of local contacts, former soldiers now in private security, DC police detectives he drank with, to put out quiet feelers. He wasn't looking for a fugitive. He was looking for a ghost who knew how to hide. He focused on the pattern of her Pentagon life, her diet, her purchases from the concourse shops. She was a creature of routine. He guessed she would seek to re-establish a baseline, a controlled environment, even on the run. He was right. Maya's first move after securing her room was to visit a specific 24-hour copy shop in Arlington. For months, she'd used its self-service terminals to access an anonymous email drop, a dead man's switch linked to a locker at Union Station. The protocol was simple. If she ever missed a weekly check-in, the locker would open automatically to a courier service that would deliver its contents to 3 major news organizations. The contents were not her story. They were the raw, unanalyzed chemical data from Office 3 Echo. At the copy shop terminal, she saw the flag. Her dead man's switch was still dormant, but the system logs showed a failed, sophisticated attempt to access the account from a foreign IP address 48 hours earlier. The timeline was critical. Someone had tried to crack her backup before her cover was blown in the briefing room. The hunt for her hadn't started with General Carson. It had started before. Her cover wasn't blown by accident. It had been targeted. This changed everything. The narrative of a loyal operator caught in a bureaucratic crossfire shattered. She was a target. Her discovery of the chemical traces wasn't random luck. It was the reason she was being hunted. The Deputy Undersecretary, a sleek careerist named Edward Lyle, wasn't just a potential security risk. He was actively cleaning house. And Maya, the invisible janitor, had become the loose end. She needed proof, not just residue samples. She needed the source. And that meant going back into the one place now swarming with people who wanted her captured or dead, the Pentagon. But here, where her 18 months of invisible work paid off, she knew the building's rhythms better than its security director. She knew about the utility access corridor behind the food court that was unmonitored due to a camera failure that facilities had lost the work order for. She knew the guard shift change at the service entrance was 90 seconds, not 30. She had a map in her head of every blind spot. While Thorne scoured the city and Carson fought his bureaucratic battles, Maya moved. She used a stolen delivery uniform and a forged badge for an HVAC contractor to walk back into the Pentagon through the loading docks at 4 a.m. Her objective: Office 3 Echo, not to steal files, but to place a device. A low-powered, passive sensor disguised as a USB wall charger designed to sniff for the specific chemical signature she'd catalogued. If the material was still present, it would log the data and ping her burner phone. The mission was a high-wire act of pure audacity. She made it to the third floor to the corridor outside Lyle's office. But as she knelt to plant the device near a baseboard outlet, her instincts screamed. The office door was slightly ajar. At 4:17 in the morning, she heard voices inside, not cleaners, two men speaking in low, urgent tones. One was Lyle. The other had an accent she recognized from her time in Eastern Europe, Georgian. She caught fragments. Delivery schedule. Baltimore Port Authority. Manifest must be clean. This was no longer about residue. This was a live operation. She pulled back, her mind racing. The chemical signature, the Georgian contact, the Port Authority. It painted a horrifying picture, a smuggling pipeline for explosive precursors, facilitated from inside the Pentagon's own intelligence office. The target wasn't domestic. It was logistical. Compromise the port, and you compromise the supply chain for half the US military's European deployments. She retreated, the sensor forgotten. The proof was no longer a chemical log. It was the conversation itself. She needed to record it. But as she moved back down the corridor, a hand fell on her shoulder. It was the building's overnight security supervisor, a man she knew named Joe. "Hey, you're not supposed to be up here without an escort." Maya's cover story was ready, but Joe's eyes narrowed. He'd seen her before in her janitor's uniform. The recognition was dawning. In that split second, Maya made a choice. She didn't fight. She didn't run. She looked him in the eye and said, "Joe, listen to me. Office 3 Echo, right now. There's a man in there with a Georgian intelligence officer. Call the Pentagon police. Call General Carson's office. Use those words." She saw the conflict in his face, procedure versus her calm, certain authority. He hesitated. That was all the time the universe allowed. The door to Office 3 Echo opened and Edward Lyle stepped out. He saw Maya. He saw Joe. His face for a microsecond was pure, undiluted panic. Then it smoothed into bureaucratic irritation. "What's all this? Who is this contractor?" Joe, flustered, began to explain. Maya knew the window had closed. While Joe was distracted, she simply turned and walked swiftly away, not running, around the corner toward the stairwell. Lyle didn't give chase. He shouted for security to stop her, but his priority was clearly the man still in his office. Maya hit the stairwell and descended not to the exit, but to the second sub-basement, to the maze of steam tunnels and fiber-optic conduits. She was now a confirmed threat inside the building, and every camera, every guard would be hunting her. But she had achieved her mission. She had confirmation, and she had a witness, however confused. The lockdown was immediate and total. Blaring alarms, sealed bulkhead doors. The Pentagon became a fortress trapping its own ghost. In his office, General Carson got the alert. An intruder matching Maya's description was in the building. His first thought wasn't triumph. It was dread. She'd come back. Why? No operator returns to the scene unless the prize is worth extinction. Sergeant Thorne, monitoring police bands, heard it too and raced toward the building. Maya, moving through the steaming, dripping tunnels, was heading for one place, the office of the Secretary of Defense. It was the only sanctuary left. Vance had tried to protect her once. He was also the one man with the authority to instantly investigate a deputy undersecretary. But to get to him, she had to cross the most heavily monitored acreage on the planet, with every system now aware of her. She used the oldest trick in the book. She triggered a fire alarm on the first sub-basement, sending a cascade of secondary alarms and evacuations. In the confusion of flashing lights and rushing personnel, she slipped into a service elevator used for furniture moves, riding it up to the earrings utility closet. She was 20 feet from Vance's outer office when two armed security officers rounded the corner. There was no hesitation this time. They raised their weapons. "Freeze." On the ground. Maya stopped, her hands rising, but her eyes were past them on the door to Vance's office. It opened. The secretary stood there, his face drawn. He looked at her, then at the guards. "Stand down," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Let her in." The guards protested, but Vance's authority was final. "Now." He stepped aside and Maya walked into the office of the Secretary of Defense, for the first time not as a cleaner, but as a defector with a world-ending piece of information. As the door closed, she didn't see the figure watching from the far end of the corridor. It was Mr. Aldrich. He spoke softly into his sleeve. Asset has made contact with the principal. Containment is no longer viable. Move to Phase 3. Phase 3 wasn't retrieval, it was eradication. The grey cell couldn't allow its operative to divulge its methods, its existence, or the secret she'd uncovered that they might have already known about. The hunters were no longer just outside. They were preparing to burn the entire forest down and everyone in it. Maya had reached safety, only to discover she'd brought the inferno right to the nation's command center. Door to the world's most powerful office closed, sealing in a secret that could start a war. Secretary Vance didn't offer Maya a seat. There was no time. "You have 60 seconds, he said, his eyes on the phone that would soon ring with demands for her surrender. Maya spoke in the clipped, efficient tone of a battlefield report. Deputy Undersecretary Edward Lyle, Office 3 Echo. He's running a logistics pipeline for explosive precursors through the Baltimore port. I have chemical residue samples. I just heard him with a Georgian national discussing manifests. The target is the military supply chain to Eastern Europe." Vance's face, already pale, went grey. He'd known Lyle for 15 years, a paper pusher, a climber, but this, proof. Sergeant Joe, overnight security, witnessed the Georgian in the office. "The samples are in a locker at Union Station. The access attempt on my dead drop was 48 hours before my cover was blown. They were cleaning house, sir. I was the loose end." The timeline was the killer detail. It meant Lyle, or someone above him, had initiated the exposure. The briefing room incident wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move to flush her into the open, where she could be discredited or disappeared. Vance moved to his desk, bypassing all normal channels. He typed a code into a secure terminal, activating a direct line to the director of the FBI and the head of the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. "This is Vance. Authorization Tango Sierra 7. I'm declaring an internal counterintelligence emergency. Priority Alpha. Target is Edward Lyle, Deputy Undersecretary, Pentagon. Apprehend immediately and secure his office. All findings come only to me." He looked at Maya. "Will he run? He knows I'm here," she said. "If he has an escape plan, he's executing it now." Outside, Phase 3 was underway. Mr. Aldrich's team wasn't storming the earring. Their method was subtler, more devastating. At 4:53 a.m., a series of targeted power fluctuations hit the Pentagon's internal servers. Not a blackout, but a sophisticated surge designed to corrupt specific data stacks. The first to go was the personnel database for the Facilities Management Office. Every record of Maya's employment dissolved into digital noise. The second was the access log for the service tunnel she'd used. They were erasing her forensic footprint, not to protect her, but to strip her of any official existence. A ghost couldn't be a witness. But they hadn't counted on General Carson. Isolated and monitoring the chaos from a backup security center, he saw the data attacks in real time. He recognized the signature, a gray cell sanitization protocol. It confirmed everything Maya had implied. He made his choice. He ordered his remaining loyal aides to pull every piece of archived data on Lyle's office, travel vouchers, procurement requests, communications metadata, and physically secure the hard drives. Then he did something unthinkable. He walked to Vance's office, alone, and knocked. Inside, Maya tensed. Vance nodded to a security officer who opened the door. Carson entered, looking at Maya not with anger but with grim respect. "The data purge has started. They're scrubbing her from the system, and they're targeting Lyle's digital trail next." He handed Vance a physical drive. "This is everything my team scraped before the walls came down. It's raw, but it's something." In that moment, the two adversaries formed a fragile, desperate alliance. The bureaucrat and the soldier, united against a common, hidden enemy. The FBI moved with shocking speed. Edward Lyle was apprehended in the Pentagon's underground parking garage, attempting to access a vehicle with diplomatic plates. The Georgian national was not found. In Lyle's briefcase, agents discovered encrypted satellite phones and shipping container codes linked to the port of Baltimore. It was enough to begin a massive, quiet investigation. The pipeline was real. But the victory was incomplete. Aldrich and the Grey Cell were still out there, and their mission had changed. With Lyle captured and Maya under the protection of the Secretary of Defense, their objective was now damage control, deniability. At 6 a.m., Aldrich requested via backchannel a private meeting with Vance. It was held in a soundproof conference room adjacent to the Situation Room. Aldrich spoke without preamble. "You have your mole, Mr. Secretary. the asset is now a liability. Her continued existence, with her knowledge of unit protocols and methods, represents an unacceptable risk to national security. We require her return. Vance's reply was ice. She isn't a piece of equipment to be returned. She's a United States soldier who just uncovered a grave threat. You will stand down. Aldrich leaned forward. You misunderstand. This isn't a request from a subordinate agency. This is a notification from the committee that oversees Gamma-level projects. The gray cell's integrity cannot be compromised. We will have the asset. The only variable is how much collateral damage you wish to incur. It was a declaration of war within the security state itself. Maya, listening from an adjoining room via feed, understood the calculus. She had seen it before. The unit was more important than any single operator. She made a decision. She entered the conference room. Both men fell silent. She looked at Aldrich. I'll come in on two conditions. One, a full, recorded debrief, after which I enter a witness protection program of my design, not yours. Two, General Carson receives a formal letter stating that his actions, while unorthodox, were in the service of exposing a critical security breach. His career is not ended because of this. Aldrich studied her, and in return, Maya said, I will sign a new version of the Official Secrets Act. I will vanish. You will never hear from me again. The legend of Whisper ends today. Vance began to protest, but Maya stopped him. It's the only way, sir. You can't fight them forever, and I'm tired of being a ghost in my own country. The deal, brokered in the heart of the Pentagon, was a surrender that felt like victory. The aftermath was a masterclass in controlled narrative. Publicly, the Pentagon announced the arrest of a mid-level intelligence official, Edward Lyle, on charges of fraud and misuse of government resources. The words espionage and bomb-making materials never appeared in any press release. The Georgian connection was buried in a classified annex. The story of the cleaning woman who was a covert operator was sealed under a Gamma-level injunction. It never happened. General Carson received his letter. He was quietly reassigned to a prestigious teaching post at the National Defense University, his reputation scarred but intact. He would never command troops again, but he would shape the minds of those who did. Secretary Vance, shaken to his core, initiated a sweeping, secret review of all special access programs, aiming to rein in the unaccountable power of units like the Gray Cell. It was a fight he would likely lose, but he felt compelled to try. Sergeant Marcus Thorne received a promotion and a medal for exceptional initiative, though the citation was vague. He knew the truth, and that was enough. The security officer, Joe, was given a generous bonus and transferred to a senior role at a quieter installation, with the strong suggestion that some memories were best left in the past. And Maya, she spent 72 hours in a sterile room at a safe house in rural Virginia, providing the full debrief. She mapped every gray cell protocol she knew, every cover identity method, every extraction route. She gave them everything, holding nothing back. In return, she was given a new name, a new social security number, and a cashier's check for an amount that would set her up for life if she lived quietly. On the morning of the fourth day, she was driven to a small regional airport, not to board a plane, but to meet a car. Behind the wheel was a woman she'd never seen before, who simply said, "Your father sends his regards." This was the final, surprising detail. Maya had not been alone. Her request for a protection program of her design had one specific element. It was to be managed by a retired Mossad handler living in Montana, a man who owed her father a debt from a forgotten operation in Beirut in the 1980s. Her new life would be watched over by a separate, distant, and fiercely loyal tribe. She wasn't entering the FBI's witness protection. She was entering her own. The car drove west toward the mountains. As the Pentagon receded in the rearview mirror, Maya allowed herself one look back. She wasn't Whisper anymore. She wasn't the janitor. She was someone new, forged in the hidden wars and saved by a truth she'd pulled from the trash. The system had used her, hunted her, and then bargained with her. But in the end, she had walked away, not with a parade, but with her life. And for an operator like her, that was the only medal that ever mattered. The story of the Pentagon's ghost was over, but the woman she became was just beginning. So what is the real cost of a secret? For Maya, the price was her entire identity, a decade of service erased, a face forgotten, a life traded for silence. But her story exposes a deeper, more unsettling truth about how our world is actually guarded. not just by soldiers in uniform, but by ghosts in plain sight. The woman cleaning your office, the man fixing the cable line, the quiet neighbor who keeps to themselves. In the calculus of modern security, the perfect cover isn't in a darkened alley. It's in the fluorescent glow of everyday invisibility. The Pentagon incident, though buried, sent shockwaves through the classified world. The gray cell was temporarily suspended for review, its methods scrutinized. New safeguards, at least on paper, were implemented to prevent a single unit from turning its guns inward on its own. Edward Lyle pleaded guilty to fraud and export violations, receiving a 20-year sentence in a secure facility. The Georgian pipeline was dismantled, and security at key ports was quietly enhanced. These were the measurable outcomes. The immeasurable one was the loss of faith within the community of operators who saw that their own institution could view them as disposable assets. General Carson, in his teaching role, now includes a case study on ethical command in the age of covert warfare. He never mentions Maya by name, but his students recognize the contours of the story. Secretary Vance served out his term but declined a second, reportedly worn down by the bureaucratic shadows he'd battled. The cleanup was efficient, total, and utterly silent, which is, of course, the whole point. The most compelling question this story leaves us with isn't about Maya's fate. It's about how many others are out there right now. How many unseen, unthanked guardians are living cover stories, their real valor known only to a handful of people in windowless rooms. They walk among us, their reflexes slowed to a civilian pace, their combat-honed senses dialed down, waiting for a call that may never come or dreading the one that will. They are the human price of a strategy that demands perfect deniability. We celebrate the visible heroes, and rightly so, but the hidden ones, the ghosts, pay a different kind of price. They trade public honor for operational success. They exchange recognition for results. Their legacy isn't in medals or monuments, but in crises that never happen, in attacks that never reach our shores, in secrets that remain buried. Maya's greatest achievement was not uncovering a plot or saving a secretary. It was walking away. She reclaimed a sliver of a life from a machine designed to consume people whole. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the most stars on their shoulder or the loudest voice at the table. Sometimes it's the person quietly pushing the mop, who sees everything, says nothing, and holds the power to bring the entire house of cards down with a single, whispered truth. The world is full of hidden stories. You just have to know where to look. If you want more real stories of the unseen forces that shape our world, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We dig deep to bring you the narratives that operate just beneath the surface. Thanks for watching.